Колеги, доброго.
Good morning, dear colleagues. We start our working day at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and the topic of the first press briefing, who and how tries to cancel mandatory e-declarations of income. Our speakers are Oleksandra Drik, president of NGO Civic Lustration Committee, also Oleksandr Lemenov, co-founder of NGO Center for Local Self-Governance, and also Yevgen Chernyak, analyst, Transparency International Ukraine. Dear guests, welcome on stage.
Доброго дня, колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The topic we are going to discuss today is very important in Ukraine, especially in the context of visa liberalization process and the sabotage of the clearance of power that during the past 2 years continue in Ukraine. The coalition of NGOs, Declaration Center of Control, we establish the priority to verify declarations of public officials and those organizations who gathered in the framework of coalition were able to defend from ruining the system of e-declarations, and there were attempts to cancel the system from the end of last year, and due to active position of NGOs and coalition that carried out some actions near the president's administration and in order to impose veto on this decision, and also due to parliamentary committee and the support of international partners, we were able not only to preserve key positions in the system of e-declarations, but also to provide the launch of the system this year. Why is this important? Because verification of declarations and finding out corruption cases, this is important instrument to fight corruption. That's why they try to cancel the system. Firstly, at the end of December, because of the budget, they try to delay the introduction of the system till 2017. And in order to launch the system, a draft law was introduced that cancelled this amendment, and Denisenko, People's Deputy, he introduced these changes to the draft law that ruined the system. And we were able to defend the system by veto of the president, and now there is one more challenge. We have to defend the e-declaration in Constitutional Court. We informed that the Constitutional Court opened the case on request of deputies, but the problem is that those challenges, these are challenges for many after Maidan achievements, and that's why coalition analyzed the request, and now we voice who wants to cancel this e-declarations through Constitutional Court and what they want to cancel and why these challenges are real. And I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Lemenov, who represents Center for Local Self-Governance. This is an NGO, the member of Coalition Declaration Under Control, and he is also manager of RPR, Anti-Corruption Group, and he is going to inform us on who wants to cancel a declaration of incomes in Ukraine. I'm Oleksandr Lemenov, the manager of Reanimation package of reform. As my colleague stated, the closest allies, 48 proxies of Yanukovych, they addressed the court, and one of them is a oppositional bloc and their allies. So these ex-party of region members, they want to avoid responsibility for and they want to preserve the system of impunity, and they cannot explain where they got their property, cars, and lands that they got during their being in office. And we should note Yuri Boyka, who was in Verkhovna Rada constantly or in the government, and the leading media, they say that he is a final beneficiary in the sphere of business, energy, and communal services. And Vladimir Novinsky, Dobkins, Natalia Korolevsky, Sergei Larin, Tatiana Bakhteyeva, Oleksandr Vilku, Yuri Vorobayev, Yevgen Bakulin, and other people, politicians, and ex-Party of Regions members want to preserve their assets by destroying a declaration system. And I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Yevgen Chernyak, and he is going to explain to you what these former party regions deputies want to cancel, actually. Good afternoon. I'm Chernyak Yevgen. I'm an analyst of Transparency International Ukraine, and I'm going to tell you about the legal side of this case. What these deputies want to cancel from the legislation on e-declarations, and the challenges are real. And there was on the 30th of December 2015, there was a request that should have been reviewed, and the hearing continues, and we wanted that this case should be solved in the framework of fighting corruption processes, and we wait for decision. They want to take out some norms from the legislation that will reduce e-declaration efficiency. They want to cancel the access to the database of declarations that should be online and should be accessible to any resident, and they say that this base should be closed. And also they want to take out the authority of some authorities of Anti-Corruption Bureau, and to prevent them from investigating these cases. If there is some wrong information in the declaration, so the national agency won't have any authority to verify these violations. So also they want to take out the norms on criminal responsibility for lying in the declaration, and in this case there is no responsibility for the violations, so this is ideal situation for all those who involved in corruption to avoid responsibility for their deeds. So the declaration should this declaration is better than previous one, and they want to take out 5 provisions from this declaration as to some under construction facilities, cars, for example, pieces of art, and some monetary assets. So in this case, these people just can hide their assets, and this is ideal situation for those who are involved in corruption, and we cannot allow them to do so. Also, they appeal to constitution, and they say that rights for their privacy is violated, that there will be information in open access about them, and this argument it doesn't sustain critics, because it is said that the right for privacy can be limited in the interest of the state, and corruption is identified as the main threat to Ukraine. And so they cancel their own positions that they state in the documents. And the cases, they happened in many countries of the world. In the United States, for example, when officials tried to appeal and the courts, constitutional courts and Supreme Courts of these countries, of the United States, of Singapore, they took decision in the interests of national interests and identified that officials, they have responsibility and they should carry out policy, and the public have the interest and have the right for good governance. And a person who is in office, he knows that he should declare his assets. If you don't want to declare, so you should just leave from power. So this is the end of my report. So this is my position. Thank you. An important thing why this challenge is real, because 1/3 of Constitutional Court is still the same people that help Yanukovych to usurp power. And 2 years ago, Supreme Council voted for the provision that recommended to release all the judges of the Supreme Court for their violation of their oaths. And for this proposal, Petro Poroshenko voted, and after he became the president, he did nothing in order to dismiss those judges who were appointed by his presidential quota. Also, what it is important to say is that by this provision, Supreme Council ordered the General Prosecutor's Office to start investigation of the decision that was taken by the Constitutional Court judges, and by the result of 2 years of investigation, General Prosecutor's Office informed that they have evidence that Constitutional Court judges violated some norms, and they took illegal decision, and it led to heavy consequences and taking the power by a former President Viktor Yanukovych. And it's not only about e-declaration, but also there are 2 proceedings on the lustration law, and it identifies that those former members of the Party of Regions, they won't get back to power, and those representatives of oligarchs in all governmental bodies headed by the President of Ukraine, they want that the process of clearance of power, that this process, they want to stop this process. That's why I would like to address to everyone, follow this case, because we should defend lustration law and e-declaration law in the Constitutional Court, and only in this case clearance of power will happen. Thank you. And last week there was a press conference on the launch of National Anti-Corruption Commission, and also they said about timing of the work of this register. And can you tell us about the mechanics of this register, and how do they correlate, and how does it influence to the current work, or this is parallel process? And what is timing and the reviewing of the case by Constitutional Court? So how do these 2 processes correlate? And speaking about the first question, the hearing on the Constitutional Court continues. So it is done under current legislation, and it doesn't influence the system of e-declaration. And if Constitutional Court identify those provisions that are now discussed, this will influence the work of National Committee and also e-declaration, and it will ruin the system and make this body not important. So the second question related to the timing, the mechanism, in order for our viewers to understand. So what is the timeline? What is the term of these procedures? When the situation is going to improve, when the Constitutional Court will take decision, And of course, this will make things difficult, but if it is working, maybe there will be some positive results for society, and we should take it into account. The law on Constitutional Court defines 3 months in order that the Constitutional Court took decision, but as my colleague told you, the Constitutional Court breaks this agenda. And as to also illustration law that is reviewed by Constitutional Court, and this case is heard for half a year, and Constitutional Court members, they violate legislation of Ukraine concerning this. And also, I would like to note that during the last hearing of illustration law in Constitutional Court, 6 judges didn't want to dismiss themselves because of the conflict of interests. The conflict of interests also envisaged in the law on that concerning the start of the National Commission of Fighting Corruption and also the law on illustration. And this means that the judges continue to violate current legislation. And this situation continues because of total impunity and lack of work of law enforcement bodies and courts, and this problem is systemic. It's difficult to solve this problem by actions. There should be some number of decisions should be taken in order to provide punishment for those who violate legislation. That's why, speaking about the terms, I would like to state that all the terms for them, they are gone. So they broke the agenda that is envisaged by the law on Constitutional Court, and it's very difficult to say for how long they are going to continue these proceedings, but we hope that judges won't break current and violate current legislation and threaten visa-free regime, for which this e-declaration system was one of the key demands. And as to illustration law, that 6 judges have conflict of interest in this case, and is there any conflict of interest on e-declarations? And as to illustration legislation, there everything is understandable. And after the meeting of the Constitutional Court, we demanded law enforcement bodies to bring those judges to responsibility for violating legislation. As to the conflict of interests in e-declaring, there is another issue. The Constitutional Court judges, they have some property and they cannot tell about the origin of this property, and the new system will force them to declare this property. And we may say that those judges are not interested in this law and in the system, and also National Anti-Corruption Committee. So we are speaking about the judges and Constitutional Court judges included. Do you have something to add? I would like to comment on a question, how it will be reflected in the working of the system of e-declarations. Firstly, so lack of responsibility on the data provided, and also half of provisions are taken out of the declaration form. So this is the work of programmers and the development of software, and in this time, if this submission will be adopted, this will be a sabotage of e-declaration system. And the conflict of interest, they try to stop all this anti-corruption reform, all this activity of e-declaration. They want to preserve the situation. But we hope that judges will be carried out by their consciousness, and we will say who tried to cancel these e-declarations. We will tell people who do this in order to stop this. Dear colleagues, thank you very much, and we hope that despite summer, civil society will be in force and will take this situation under control. And on behalf of Ukraine Crisis Media Center, I invite you to come to our studio and to report and inform society and to involve active participants. Thank you very much, and next briefing at 12.